Guys, for our midterm exam, we were asked to answer four prompt questions. So the first one says, discuss and comment on 3 arguments for why bias and hate crimes are different from typical crime. So the first argument that bias and hate crimes are different from a typical crime is that bias crime is rooted in offender's opinion against a specific aspect of a person they are committing a crime against. The second argument is that hate crime is not only out of necessity an attack simply on a person, but on a way of life or community of individuals. Finally, the third argument is that by attacking a disability that cannot be changed, that offender is for some reason offended by they are attacking something inextricably makes them who they are. In the first argument, for example, imagine someone has a bias against Hispanics, like myself, that causes them to come to the opinion that all Hispanics cannot be trusted and are thieves. So when something at work shows up missing, they blame the Hispanic coworker of stealing. On the second point, there is an outlook and reactions to various groups, for instance, Israelis and Palestinians. Hate crimes because of race, they are just really sad. We're all one race, a human race. And yet so many shootings, stabbings, slayings, and on daily occurrences happen because someone or a group of someone's vehemently hates another race. In the third argument, we're looking at someone who is offended at someone's disability and then attacks them over that disability. That is something that cannot be controlled. I once knew a wonderful gentleman named Doug who was mentally handicapped, autistic. He was big and loud and could be scary to some people who don't know how to deal with autism. Some people are just freaked out by what they don't understand and will lash out and hate on others they meet who are artistic out of misplaced fear. However, others will outright make fun of an autistic person or someone who, because of a medical disability, has one shorter leg than another, attacking who they are through words or imitations. This is wrong. It's really wrong to make fun of somebody. I feel like we're all equal people, and if we have disabilities, so what? We're still human beings, right? The evidence is all around us. As I grew up, I've witnessed each of the examples I shared in the arguments above happen. We see anti-mask attacks daily. The news is full of them. It is impossible to miss. People being attacked for their disability is so sad. That stand-up comics include so-called jokes, mocking people who are mentally and physically handicapped, have the audience laugh, that lead to be quite frank and disturbing. But we live in a messed up world where evil is called good, and good is called evil, and evil is evil applauded, so perhaps I shouldn't be surprised. It should come as no surprise that I found some arguments convincing. When someone attacks another bias, when someone suffers because of an authentic hatred, is absolutely different than a regular crime. A simple robbery is not the same as accusing someone of being a robber because they are Hispanic. To state the point with clarity, I think that a crime is a crime. However, crimes committed because of hatred are biased and specifically targeted crimes. Targeted someone for something that they cannot control is no longer just a simple crime. Question number 2 says, does hate legislation violate our First Amendment rights? The First Amendment is there to protect our right to free speech, the right to state what we want to state. The question is, does hate crimes legislation violate our First Amendment rights? And I answer that it does not. For instance, if a person were to use a racial slur in a conversation with friends, that would be protected by his or her First Amendment rights. However, if the person was to use a racial slur while beating someone up, that would indeed be a hate crime. Numerous articles on Wisconsin versus Mitchell provided lots of data that can be looked up and compared from various viewpoints. Hate crime legislation is written very clearly is not to step over all First Amendment rights, and carefully applying the hate crime legislation to individuals' causes should not cause any damage to the First Amendment rights. Question number 3 says, it is often argued that hate crimes laws serve a symbolic function. Is it worth passing legislation for this purpose? When the argument is made that hate crime laws serve as a symbolic function, it is because hate crimes don't just impact the individual that was harmed, but radiate outward into the entire community of people represented by the victim. I believe that it is important to pass legislation that deal with hate crimes, simply because hate crimes do not tend to affect one person but many. Any crime affects anyone. If you commit it, you should do the time. Crimes are bad, period. There are many issues that courts have with addressing hate crimes, providing true intent and bias. Poor data reporting on hate crimes. Hate crime laws are inconsistent state to state, just to name a few. There are laws also known as dead letter laws that are in books in individual states but not enforced. A simple example of this, that there are speed limits that can be enforced. However, a police officer can choose not to enforce the law if the person is going just a few miles over the speed limit. This symbolic unenforced laws are in the books but not usually enforced. Question number 4 says, how reliable is our data on hate crimes? What factors specifically impact the quality of hate crime data in the U.S.? Explain. The data on hate crimes in the U.S. is not very reliable at all. Especially, the data is more seeing how the police and other national and local agencies report hate crimes. Even the best hate crimes data that comes from the FBI is usually voluntary reported data. There are 200,000 to 300,000 hate crimes per year, and only around 10,000 are actually reported. Why is the quality of hate crime data in the U.S. so poor? The most clear and thorough representation of this issue and various causes that is found in an article that I found on www.congress.gov/CRS product R46318 is reported by Nathan Kepler with a publication date of 12/16/2025. The data is collected by two major agencies, the FBI through the Hate Crime Statistics Program, which stands for HCSP, and the Department of Justice through the Bureau of Justice, BOJ, the National Victimization Survey, the NCVS, and the HES numbers through the FBI are always much lower than those reported through the NCVS. There are a number of reasons for disparity. One reason is that the methodology with which the two sources compile their data. The FBI only reports on crimes that have been reported to police, while BJS collects the data of all criminal victimizations that may or may not meet the salutary definition of hate crimes and may or may not be reported by the police. There are numerous reasons why such crimes would be unreported to the police, like fear of further violence in response, or that the police wouldn't be able or couldn't help the victim. Perhaps even feeling that the incident was too trivial to report. Even where a crime to have happened, the police might not report it because it doesn't meet the sanitary definition of hate crime after careful investigation. I feel like police should investigate any crimes, and they should go forward with them. They should investigate everything, and whoever is guilty, do the time.